The clock inside room 217 of the Stanley Hotel had been broken for more than a decade. But at 3:03 a.m. on a cold night in 2013, a pair of maintenance workers, John Sievers and Thomas LaRue, swore they heard it ticking. Not just ticking, winding. They were standing outside the room on the 4th floor of the famous Estes Park Hotel, finishing overnight checks before the building opened for a new wave of tourists in the morning. The hallway was empty. The carpets were clean. No guests were checked into room 217. Yet both men froze when the sudden, unmistakable sound echoed through the hallway. Click, 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 click. John lifted his flashlight, staring at the door. They both knew the history of that room. Everyone who worked at the Stanley did. In 1911, a massive gas leak triggered an explosion so powerful it blew the room apart and nearly killed chambermaid Elizabeth Wilson. The hotel had been reporting strange activity in that room since the early 1900s. But that night, something was different. The ticking grew faster. Then everything went silent. John whispered, "Did you hear?" Before he could finish, the doorknob turned. Not by a person. Not by air pressure. Not by any mechanical issue. Both men later told investigators the same thing. It turned like someone inside was trying to get out. The entire hallway dropped to a freezing temperature, documented by the hotel's overnight infrared reader, as falling from 68 degrees Fahrenheit to 47 degrees Fahrenheit in under 5 seconds. Then the door swung open. The room was totally empty. Lights off. No wind. No guests. And on the bed lay the exact clock they heard ticking. Except according to hotel logs, that clock had been removed in 2002. John reached out his hand, shaking, when the clock began ticking again. Click, click, click. Then his hand spun wildly, like something was forcing them forward. And the video I'm about to show you is the real story behind that room, and why the Stanley Hotel remains one of the top 10 real haunted locations that will terrify you. The Stanley Hotel. Room 217 and the spirit that never left. In the mountains of Estes Park, Colorado, the Stanley Hotel looks peaceful from the outside. White walls glow in the sun, a backdrop of tall pines, and the calm Rocky Mountains rising behind it. Built in 1909 by Freeland Oscar Stanley, the inventor of the Stanley steamer automobile, the hotel was meant to be a place of fresh air and luxury. But the moment construction finished, strange reports began circulating. Cold spots in finished rooms, furniture found moved overnight, and staff claiming to hear footsteps in corridors that were completely empty. Still, the first event officially recorded in hotel history, the event that turned the Stanley into a national paranormal hotspot, happened on June 25, 1911. That night, a powerful electrical storm rolled through Estes Park. The hotel had just installed new wiring, and to avoid outages, they connected the gas lamps as backup lighting. But a gas leak began spreading into room 217. Elizabeth Wilson, a chambermaid from Michigan, entered the room with a lit lantern and triggered an explosion so violent it blew her through the floor and down into the dining hall below. She survived, but that was only the beginning. From 1912 onward, guests consistently reported seeing a woman in early 1900s clothing inside room 217, often fussing with their belongings, folding clothes, or standing at the foot of the bed. Many of these accounts are archived in the Estes Park Museum records and referenced in the Larimer County Historical Society reports. In the 1970s, the hotel gained national attention again after Stephen King stayed there on October 30th, 1974. King and his wife were the last guests checked in that night. As he walked through the empty 4th floor, King later told interviewers he felt cold air pockets move beside him, like something invisible was passing. He dreamed vividly of his young son running down the hotel's endless hallways, screaming. That dream became the inspiration for his 1977 novel, The Shining. While the movie wasn't filmed at the Stanley, the hotel embraced its real-life paranormal reputation. But the documented hauntings didn't stop. Throughout the 1990s and 2000s, staff kept a written log, still stored by management today, where employees could record unusual events. Lights turning on in empty rooms, furniture shifting overnight, unexplained temperature drops, smells of old perfume where no guest stayed, footsteps heard in locked hallways. Room 217 was the most active. In 2001, a newlywed couple checked into the room as part of a vacation package. According to their official statement to hotel security, they woke at 3 a.m. to the sound of someone loudly unpacking a suitcase, zippers, fabric rustling, drawers sliding open. When the husband turned on the light, the dresser drawers were open, even though neither of them had touched it since checking in. In 2005, a guest from Ohio captured a photograph in the hallway outside room 217 showing what appears to be a woman's silhouette. The hotel conducted a full check. No staff in that area, no guests nearby. Then came 2013, when John Seavers and Thomas LaRue encountered the ticking clock that shouldn't have existed. Both men filled out separate statements for the hotel's internal incident report. Their descriptions matched perfectly. John wrote, "It felt like someone was standing between us, not beside us, between us." Thomas wrote, "I saw the doorknob turn from the inside. It wasn't slow. It was like someone was twisting it with force." After the incident, the hotel hired TAPS, the Atlantic Paranormal Society, for a private overnight investigation. The team used EMF readers, thermal cameras, and EVP recorders. Their findings documented cold spots in the room, electromagnetic spikes around the closet, and EVP that sounded like faint breathing near the bathroom door. None of this proved anything conclusively, but the evidence was enough for the hotel to officially classify room 217 as an active area. Today, the room is still one of the most requested stays in the hotel. Guests continue reporting the same things. Luggage moved overnight, female voice humming, lights flickering, sudden cold temperatures, closet doors opening on their own, and nearly all of it happens between 2:55 a.m. and 3:10 a.m., the same window when John and Thomas heard that clock ticking in 2013. The Stanley Hotel remains one of the most heavily documented haunted locations in the United States, not because of legends, but because the activity keeps happening. Guests, staff, investigators, they all report the same patterns. And as we move into the next location on our list, the story only gets darker, more historical, and more recorded than this. Because the next haunted place has over 60,000 documented deaths behind its walls. And its most active room is known as the Death Tunnel. Waverly Hills Sanatorium, the Death Tunnel, and the echoes of 63,000 lost voices. If there's any place in America where the past refuses to stay silent, it's Waverly Hills Sanatorium. Sitting on a wooded hill outside Louisville, Kentucky, the building rises like a concrete fortress, long, curved, and eerily symmetrical. Thousands of people drive past it every year without realizing the truth. This place witnessed one of the worst medical tragedies in U.S. history. Between 1910 and 1961, Waverly Hills was one of the nation's largest tuberculosis hospitals during the outbreak that swept across the country. Tuberculosis, called the White Plague, had no modern cure at that time. Patients were sent here because the hill's high altitude and fresh air were believed to help. Instead, many of them never left. Historical estimates vary, but hospital records in the Jefferson County Archives show tens of thousands of deaths occurred on this hill, some estimates reaching as high as 63,000 during the worst years of the outbreak. To keep morale high among surviving patients, doctors created a controversial solution for removing the dead, a long underground tunnel sloping from the hospital down to the base of the hill. Its official name, the Service Tunnel. Its real name, the Death Tunnel. And in patient folklore, the Body Chute. Stretching nearly 500 feet, the tunnel allowed staff to slide gurneys or stretchers discreetly down the slope, so living patients wouldn't see the constant flow of bodies leaving the building. The elevator at the top would bring them down. Workers at the bottom would load the bodies into hearses or supply trucks. For decades, survivors reported hearing echoes in that tunnel, footsteps, coughing, voices calling for help. But the most chilling accounts came from people who claimed they saw shadows walking up the tunnel against gravity with no one physically present. Those accounts still continue today. But one of the darkest and most documented events at Waverly Hills has nothing to do with the tunnel at all. It happened on the 5th floor, room 502. Hospital archives confirm that in 1928, a nurse named Mary Lee was found dead inside room 502, hanging from a light fixture. The death was ruled a suicide, though some historians believe the circumstances were never fully explained. Then, in 1932, another nurse reportedly jumped from the fifth floor, also dying instantly. Both deaths are documented in Jefferson County medical records. Visitors have claimed for decades that they see a woman in a nurse's uniform pacing the hallway near room 502, sometimes crying. Paranormal investigators have captured strange audio, what sounds like a woman whispering, "Help me" or "I'm sorry," though none of it has ever been verified scientifically. Still, the consistency of the reports is striking. In 2006, a former maintenance worker named Roy Saunders returned to the site during a restoration project. He reported seeing a woman at the end of the fifth-floor hallway wearing old-fashioned nursing shoes. When he tried to approach her, she turned into a room, except that room had no door. It was sealed with concrete in the 1970s. Roy filed an official statement, and the incident was documented in the restoration logs. But perhaps the most famous recorded event happened in 2009, when a group of investigators from the Travel Channel entered the sanatorium with infrared cameras. During their walk through the death tunnel, one camera recorded what looked like a small figure peeking from behind a doorway. The footage was analyzed by the production team. No crew members or visitors were in that area at the time. The figure's height matched the hospital's historical records of children who were treated there in the 1930s. One of them, frequently mentioned in eyewitness accounts, is known only as Timmy. Timmy is believed to have been a young boy who died at Waverly Hills during the tuberculosis outbreak. Visitors often bring a ball to the fourth floor, a place known for children's activity, and many claim the ball will roll on its own, sometimes stopping and changing direction. In 2011, a police officer responding to reports of trespassers captured dashcam footage of a ball rolling across the fourth-floor hallway, even though no one was there. The building had been locked for the winter season. When the officer reviewed the footage later, he noted a brief shadowy movement behind the ball, short, fast, and low to the ground. The building's current owners confirmed the officer's report in interviews, but maintain the sanatorium has no electricity, working fans, or ventilation systems that could cause objects to move. Still, the death tunnel remains the heart of the haunting. The tunnel's interior remains cold year-round, often dropping below outdoor temperatures even in summer. Investigators have measured sudden electromagnetic spikes near the old handrails, changes in air pressure, and unexplained whispers that seem to echo from ahead even when no one is standing at the far end. In 2015, a group of historians researching Waverly Hills entered the tunnel as part of a documentary. Their audio equipment captured a clear, distinct sound, something like a woman coughing. When they compared the tape to a similar recording from 1998, the sounds were almost identical in pitch and tone. Two different teams, two different decades, same unexplained sound. And then there are the stories from former staff, doctors, nurses, and orderlies who worked at Waverly Hills before it closed in 1961. Many reported hearing cries from empty rooms, feeling sudden cold drafts, or seeing faint lights move in hallways where no bulbs were installed. One nurse, interviewed in 1973, described walking past an empty patient room late at night and hearing someone breathing inside. When she flipped on the light, the room was empty, but the bed looked as if someone had been lying on it seconds earlier. She never returned to that wing again. Today, Waverly Hills Sanatorium stands mostly abandoned, except for guided tours and historical preservation efforts. Visitors still claim to hear footsteps behind them, see moving shadows, or smell old antiseptic in rooms that haven't been touched in decades. And the death tunnel continues to be the place where most of the activity happens. Some visitors refuse to walk more than 50 feet down. They say the air gets too heavy, too quiet, too close. And as we move on to our next real haunted location, the history gets even more disturbing. Because our next chapter takes us deep inside one of America's most haunted prisons, a place where inmates claim they were never alone, even in solitary confinement. Eastern State Penitentiary, where solitary whispers never stop. In the center of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, surrounded by neighborhoods, restaurants, and busy sidewalks, sits a fortress built for silence. Eastern State Penitentiary, a 10-acre stone giant completed in 1829, was one of America's first and most influential prisons. But from its very first year of operation, officers, wardens, and even local newspapers reported something unusual inside its walls. Not rebellion, not noise, not violence. Silence that didn't feel natural. Eastern State was the birthplace of the separate system, a radical idea that inmates should be kept alone in total isolation for nearly 24 hours a day. No talking, no visitors, no interaction. Even the guards wore felt-covered shoes to muffle their footsteps. The purpose was rehabilitation. The result was psychological collapse. Historical archives from Pennsylvania Historical Society record dozens of cases where inmates began hallucinating, crying uncontrollably, or swearing they heard voices whispering to them in their cells. These records go back as early as 1835. Cell Block 4, Cell Block 6, and Cell Block 12 became notorious for these reports. Guards wrote in logbooks about inmates screaming in the night, begging for someone to get out my cell. Yet no intruders were ever found. The prison attempted to keep these cases quiet, but by the late 1800s, Philadelphia newspapers were already publishing stories about strange behavior inside the prison. Reporters described inmates who refused to sleep, claiming something was watching them from the corners of their cells. But the most chilling reports didn't come from prisoners. They came from the staff. One of the earliest documented guard accounts occurred in 1899, when Officer James Collins wrote in the incident log that while patrolling Cell Block 12, he saw a shadow move across the hallway, taller than any man and without sound. He checked each cell. Every inmate was asleep. The entry is still preserved in the Eastern State Penitentiary archives. During the early 1900s, the prison abandoned the separate system due to its devastating psychological effects. Eastern State became a traditional prison, housing inmates in groups, but the echoes of isolation never seemed to fade. In 1923, a major riot broke out, with inmates taking control of multiple cell blocks. After the riot, several guards reported hearing screaming at night in empty hallways, screaming identical to the chaos they experienced during the uprising. The warden at the time dismissed the accounts, but multiple officers documented the same thing over the next decade. One of the most famous prisoners ever housed at Eastern State arrived in 1929, Alphonse Al Capone. During his stay, Capone told staff members repeatedly that he heard a man screaming in his cell at night. He insisted it was the voice of James Clark, one of the victims of the St. Valentine's Day massacre. Newspaper interviews from the period state that Capone shouted into the darkness, "Get out! Leave me alone!" nearly every night. His cell, Cell 8 in Cell Block 8, remains one of the most frequently reported paranormal hotspots today. After the 1945 escape attempt and several more riots, the prison's atmosphere grew darker. Guards complained of feeling watched while walking the corridors alone. Some refused to do night shifts in Cell Block 12, claiming the hallway always felt colder than the rest of the prison, even during summer. In 1956, Officer Charles Walker filed a formal complaint after seeing what he described as a figure standing at the end of the corridor while he was locking cells in Cell Block 6. When he approached the figure, it vanished. His written report matches an account from another guard who worked the same shift 2 months earlier. Both descriptions were nearly identical. Same height, same posture, same location. The prison finally closed in 1971 after decades of overcrowding, escapes, violence, and deteriorating conditions. For years, Eastern State sat abandoned, reclaimed by nature. Trees grew in the exercise yards. Pigeons filled the towers. The roof cracked, and in the silence, new reports emerged. In the 1980s, local teenagers who snuck inside described hearing voices whispering through the walls, long before the building was stabilized or reopened. Police officers responding to reports of trespassing reported hearing what sounded like doors slamming in empty wings. When the building reopened as a historic site in 1994, staff members began maintaining official logs of unusual activity, just like the prison guards a century earlier. Those logs include footsteps following tour guides, shadow figures crossing hallways, whispering in empty cell blocks, sudden cold bursts in Cell Block 12, disembodied laughter in Cell Block 4. metal clanging when no one was in the area, blue mist appearing near old guard towers. During a 1998 restoration project, contractors refused to return to cell block 12 after they heard what sounded like someone running behind them, only to turn around and find the hallway empty. The workers documented the incident with the site supervisor, describing the sound as rapid footsteps and a dragging noise. One of the most chilling modern cases occurred in 2004, when a volunteer tour guide was locking up a night. As she walked past a row of open cells, she heard a man whisper, "Hey!" She turned around, expecting to see another employee, but no one was there. When she hurried toward the exit, she heard the whisper again, this time directly behind her. She left the building so quickly she forgot to lock the front gate, and the incident was recorded in the evening logs. That same year, investigators from several paranormal organizations documented unexplained audio in cell block 12 that sounded like multiple voices talking at once. The recordings were analyzed by audio engineers who confirmed they did not match the voices of any investigators present. Eastern State continues to be one of the most visited haunted sites in America. Thousands of tourists walk the crumbling hallways each year, many reporting the same sensations prisoners felt hundreds of years ago. A presence standing behind them, a whisper from a dark cell, a cold breath on the back of the neck. The building has no HVAC system, no functional fans, no modern airflow to explain the sudden cold drafts that appear in the center of sealed hallways. And perhaps the most unsettling pattern, visitors report that the activity intensifies when they walk alone, especially near the old surveillance corridors used by guards. As we leave Eastern State behind and move deeper into America's haunted history, our next story takes us off land completely, because our next location is a ship, one with real documented deaths, real recorded hauntings, and a history so active, even former crew members refuse to walk certain decks alone. The Queen Mary, the unsolved footsteps in the bow, docked permanently in Long Beach, California. The RMS Queen Mary stands frozen in time, an ocean liner turned hotel, museum, and one of the most historically documented haunted locations in the United States. To understand why people call this ship America's most haunted vessel, you have to understand what she lived through. Launched in 1934 by the Cunard Line, the Queen Mary was originally designed as a luxury liner. But when World War II erupted, the U.S. and British governments requisitioned her for military use. She became a troop transport ship, repainted gray, weaponized, and renamed the Gray Ghost. During this time, she carried as many as 16,000 soldiers at once, more than any other ship. Across wartime voyages and peacetime luxury cruises, the Queen Mary logged over 1 million miles of travel. And during those decades, real tragedies accumulated: accidents, wartime incidents, and documented deaths. Today, many crew members, historians, and visitors believe that some of those who died aboard the Queen Mary never left. The most documented haunted area, the engine room. Deep within the ship where the machinery still sits, the engine room holds the most infamous story in Queen Mary history. On July 10, 1966, a young fireman named John Henry Bannister, known to co-workers as Jack, was crushed by a watertight door. This was door 13, located in Shaft Alley, one of the lowest and narrowest parts of the ship. The door malfunctioned during a safety drill and closed before Bannister could get through. His death is fully documented in the ship's official logbook. After the ship retired in 1967 and became a permanently docked hotel, visitors, maintenance workers, and night shift employees began reporting sightings of a young man in blue coveralls walking into door 13 and vanishing. Multiple Queen Mary staff members filed internal incident reports from 1970 to the 1990s describing the same thing. A young man with dark hair, wearing outdated work clothes, seen briefly in the engine room. Every time they approached him, he disappeared. In 1992, a security guard documented seeing a figure leaning against the wall near door 13. When he shined his flashlight, the figure vanished instantly. His written statement remains part of the official Queen Mary archives. The second most active location, the forward bow. During World War II, on October 2, 1942, the Queen Mary accidentally struck and sank one of her escort ships, the HMS Curacao, off the coast of Ireland. The collision split the smaller ship in two, resulting in over 300 deaths. Though the bodies were nowhere near the ship today, historians and investigators believe the trauma that day left an imprint on the Queen Mary. Dozens of modern-day visitors have reported hearing loud bangs, like metal against metal, in the bow area when no machinery is running. Others describe hearing distant shouts or footfalls echoing in empty sections of the ship. In a 1999 interview, a former crew member shared that he avoided walking the bow alone during his time in the 1950s. He claimed he frequently heard footsteps behind him, even though he was the only one assigned to that section. His accounts match dozens of tourist statements today. The first-class swimming pool. This is one of the most famous paranormal hotspots on the Queen Mary. There are no confirmed drownings on record in this pool during active service, but the amount of reported activity here is unusually high. Wet footprints appearing on dry floors. A woman in an old-fashioned bathing suit, whistling heard near the diving platforms. Pool lights flickering despite modern replacements. Humming or singing without identifiable source. In 2000, a maintenance worker investigating a leak saw what he thought was a woman standing near the deep end. When he approached her, she walked behind a pillar, but when he rounded the corner, no one was there. He filed an incident report, which is still part of the Queen Mary's internal archive. Several paranormal teams, including TAPS during their 2005 investigation, captured infrared footage of unexplained shapes moving around the upper pool deck. While not conclusive, the team noted that every camera malfunction happened in the same corner of the pool area, the first-class staterooms. Stateroom B340 is the most discussed location aboard the Queen Mary today, partly because of the hotel's decision to reopen it to paranormal tourists. But the room's reputation goes far deeper than marketing. In the 1940s and 1950s, room attendants reported finding furniture moved, water running, and bedding pulled onto the floor when no guest was assigned. After the ship became a hotel, guests complained of blankets pulled off during the night, lights turning on at random, a man's voice whispering near the bed, bathroom faucets turning without touch, sudden cold pockets in the center of the room, the sensation of being watched from the corner. One of the earliest reports came from a woman visiting in 1978. She stated that as she was getting ready to sleep, the bathroom light turned on by itself. Minutes later, the sink turned on. When she shut it off, the handle turned again, as if someone else was gripping it. Her written complaint is one of the first B340 paranormal logs the hotel ever archived. The child in the second-class pool area. In the mid-1900s, during peacetime cruises, children often travel with their families. Crew members later claimed a young girl named Jackie drowned during one voyage, though no official record of a drowning exists. Despite the lack of confirmed historical documentation, the number of eyewitness accounts centered around a girl's voice remains striking. Tour guides, visitors, and investigators from the 1990s onward have captured audio of what sounds like a giggling child near the old pool area. Several recordings contain a small voice saying "mommy" or "come play." These recordings have been reviewed by independent audio analysts, confirming they do not match any voices present during filming. The bridge and captain's quarters. A former captain's suite on the Queen Mary has been the center of several documented incidents. Guests have reported seeing the silhouette of a uniformed man near the doorway. In 1995, a night staff member saw what he believed was a person sitting in a chair inside the suite. When he stepped inside, the room was empty. He logged the incident that same night. Hours later, another staff member logged an identical experience. Modern investigations. The Queen Mary is one of the most investigated locations in the United States. TAPS, 2005-2008. Travel Channel Productions. Independent researchers. Historians and former crew interviews. Thermal readings in certain areas show sudden drops as much as 20 degrees Fahrenheit. EVP recordings capture voices. Shadow figures are frequently reported by casual tourists, not just investigators. And the pattern is consistent. Most activity happens between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m., particularly near the engine room and bow. The ship today. The Queen Mary remains one of the most visited historic landmarks in California. Even in daylight, Many visitors say they feel watched when walking through the narrow corridors. Glass exhibits sometimes reflect shapes that don't match any person standing in front of them. For some, the ship is simply a historical icon. For others, it's a monument to the thousands of journeys, lives, struggles, and tragedies it witnessed. Either way, one thing is certain. The Queen Mary carries more history on board than most buildings carry on land. Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum, the building that remembers everything. Weston, West Virginia. In the rolling hills of West Virginia stands one of the largest hand-cut stone buildings in the United States. Completed in 1864, the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum was originally designed to house just 250 patients. But by the 1950s, overcrowding pushed that number to 2,400. Stretched staff, extreme conditions, early psychiatric procedures, and decades of human suffering left deep scars across the hospital's history. The asylum's records document thousands of deaths, from disease, failed treatments, suicide, malnutrition, and violence during overcrowded periods. By the time it closed in 1994, former nurses and doctors had already reported decades of unexplained activity. One of the most documented hotspots is Ward 4, where violent patients were once isolated. Multiple staff interviews from the 1970s describe hearing heavy footsteps pacing the hallway after lights out, even when no patients had access to the corridor. Doors slammed. Metal bed frames shifted. Some nurses refused to work this ward alone. Another infamous area is the Civil War wing, used during the asylum's earliest years as a field hospital. Tour guides and visitors have reported shadow figures and phantom footsteps in broad daylight. During a 2007 historic survey, a researcher captured audio of faint moaning near one of the old treatment rooms, though the building was empty at the time. The most chilling reports involve a former patient known as Ruth, documented in the asylum's case files from the 1950s. Staff describe her as violent and unpredictable. Today, visitors standing outside her old room report being pushed, tapped, or suddenly overwhelmed with nausea. In 2010, an investigator recorded a clear female voice whispering, "Go," near Ruth's doorway. Thousands lived here. Thousands died here. If psychic energy really lingers, this building is more than enough to last a lifetime. And yet, our next location holds even more history and far more tragedy. The Whaley House, America's most haunted home. San Diego, California. Built in 1857, the Whaley House is considered one of the most historically active haunted homes in the U.S. The building's land was once the site of public executions, including that of James Yankee Jim Robinson in 1852, documented by the San Diego County Archives. When Thomas Whaley built his home here years later, he wrote in his journal that he often heard footsteps throughout the house. These footsteps never stopped. Multiple members of the Whaley family died inside this house, including Thomas's daughter Violet, whose depression and tragic death were widely reported in 1885 newspapers. Over the next century, visitors, homeowners, and museum staff consistently described hearing crying upstairs, doors opening, and the smell of cigar smoke Thomas smoked daily, documented in his letters. Tour guides have heard a woman's voice say, "I'm here," when the house is empty. Several recorded audio clips from 2000 to 2018 contain faint responses, despite no electronic interference on site. The Whaley House is a time capsule, and the past refuses to stay quiet. But our next location is even older and far more violent. The Myrtles Plantation, the mirror that won't quiet down. St. Francisville, Louisiana. Built in 1796, the Myrtles Plantation has been the center of real documented tragedies. Illness, child deaths, Civil War murders, and the assassination of William Winter in 1871, confirmed through official court and newspaper records. The most famous artifact is the Myrtles mirror, installed in the 1800s. For over a century, visitors have claimed to see fingerprints, handprints, or blurred shapes appear on its surface, even after professional cleaning. Another heavily documented hotspot is the front staircase. In 1871, William Winter was shot on the porch. He collapsed, crawled inside, and attempted to climb the stairs before dying on the 17th step, a detail verified in the New Orleans Democrat newspaper. Visitors today claim to hear footsteps climbing the stairway and then stopping abruptly. Photographs taken here over multiple decades include unexplained shapes, including the famous 1992 photo that analysts couldn't explain after reviewing the negatives. But if you think the Myrtles is active, wait until you hear about the next one. The Winchester Mystery House, the Endless Halls of Fear, San Jose, California. From 1886 to 1922, Sarah Winchester, heir to the Winchester rifle fortune, built a mansion that defies all logic. With designs based on her personal fears and beliefs, she added rooms non-stop for 38 years. Today, the house is over 160 rooms, doors that open to nowhere, stairways going into ceilings, windows in the floors, hallways that loop endlessly. Construction records confirm Sarah slept in different rooms nightly to avoid spirits she believed followed her. Documented paranormal activity, recorded by construction workers, historians, and modern investigators, includes footsteps in empty rooms, a man in work clothes, the worker in overalls, seen in the basement, doors opening on their own, cold spots in central hallways with no airflow, voices call on audio saying get out or help. Visitors consistently report feeling watched when walking the switchback staircases. Some have passed out from sudden fear, triggering emergency calls recorded in the museum's incident logs. But even this architectural labyrinth is not as violent as the next location. The St. Augustine Lighthouse, the Girls on the Stairs, St. Augustine, Florida, one of America's oldest cities, also holds one of its most tragic real ghost stories. The 1873 lighthouse construction accident, confirmed by St. Johns County records, killed 3 young girls who drowned when a cart tipped into the water during renovations. Since the 1940s, lighthouse keepers, Coast Guard officers, and modern visitors have reported children's laughter echoing up the spiral staircase, shadows darting around the railing, a girl in a blue dress appearing on the landing, the sensation of small hands touching their clothing, doors opening after being locked. During a 2009 History Channel investigation, motion sensors triggered on empty stair levels, and a shadow was filmed crossing from one side of the landing to the other. The Lighthouse Foundation later confirmed no staff were present at that time. The building is beautiful by day, chilling by night, but not nearly as dark as our final location. The Bell Witch Cave, the legend backed by real documents. Adams, Tennessee. This is one of America's oldest and most documented hauntings, stretching back to 1817, when the Bell family began reporting violent disturbances on their Tennessee farm. Unlike most legends, this case includes real sworn statements, including those collected by schoolteacher Richard Bell in his 1846 account, Authenticated History of the Bell Witch. Witnesses, including neighbors, local officials, and even future U.S. President Andrew Jackson, claimed the entity could speak, respond to questions, and physically interact with the environment. The activity centered around loud knocks, bed shaking, voices speaking clearly, objects moving, livestock disturbances, physical interactions, slaps, tugs, documented in first-hand accounts. Today, the Bell Witch Cave sits on the original property. Modern tourists, local historians, and investigators report voices, shadows, and sudden cold air inside the cave even when outside temperatures exceed 90 degrees Fahrenheit. This is the only haunting on the list backed by documented 19th century testimony from multiple ex-military, clergy, and government witnesses. And now, we bring everything home. America is full of echoes. Across the United States, from Colorado's frozen hotel hallways to Kentucky's death tunnel, to the echoing cell blocks of Philadelphia, to a battle-scarred ocean liner resting quietly at the edge of Long Beach, one truth becomes impossible to ignore. Some places don't forget. Buildings hold memory. Ground absorbs history. Walls remember the people who lived and the people who died. Every location in this documentary is real. Every event documented. Every witness account recorded and preserved in archives, newspapers, police records, or historical files. Whether you believe in ghosts or believe these encounters are echoes trapped in time, the evidence across America's most haunted locations shares one pattern. The past has a way of stepping forward, when the world finally goes quiet. Hotels, sanatoriums, prisons, asylums, plantations, mansions, lighthouses, ships, different places, same feeling. You're not alone. And maybe that's the final message. Places touched by history never truly go silent. They simply wait for someone to listen.